Hello and welcome back. In this tutorial, I'll be showing how to make a double welt pocket, and this is something you often see in jackets, coats, trousers and some skirts. If this is something you're interested in learning, you definitely want to keep on watching. For the purpose of this tutorial and this illustration, I'll be using this brown leftover fabric as my main fabric, while I'll be using this Ankara print as the welt as well as the pocket bag. Now you can use any fabric of your choice, but I'm using two different fabrics just so it is even or it is easier to see. So this is what I'm using for the welt, and to cut out the welt, I'll cut out a piece that is 8 inches wide and 5 inches long to make the welt for this pocket. 8 inches wide and 5 inches long. I cut it out and this is what we have. You can see it is 5 inches long and it is 8 inches in width. So this is what we have for the welt. I went ahead to press interfacing on the wrong side of the fabric. This would stiffen the fabric a lot more as opposed to using just the fabric. You can use any form of interfacing that you have, and I use the iron to create a crease in the middle of this fabric. All right, next up I'm just going to draw a line along the middle of the fabric using that crease line as a guide. Right after drawing out that line, I'm going to go ahead and mark out the midpoint. So I'm using my tape. So since this is 8 inches wide, the midpoint will be 4 inches. I'm going to mark the 4-inch point. Then on either side of that line, I'm going to mark 2.25 inches. So on either side of that midpoint that we just marked out, I'm going to mark 2.25 inches to the left and 2.25 inches to the right as well. So when you're done, the total width for this pocket will be 4.5 inches. So when you put your tape from here to here, you should have 4.5 inches. You do not want it wider. I like to use 4.5 inches for my welt pocket, okay? So I'm just going to extend that line a bit just so it's more visible to see, all right? Then from that point, I'm going to mark half an inch upwards like this, and I'm going to do the same thing on the midpoint of the line, mark half an inch upwards, and on the other side as well I'm going to mark half an inch upwards, and I'm going to connect all those points together. Now this is to create the opening for the pocket. That is what we're doing right now. So I'm going to connect all those points together, and I'm going to repeat the same thing on the lower part of that line. I'm going to mark half an inch downwards like this, and half an inch on the middle, half an inch on the other end, and connect all the points together. So when you have done this, you should have a rectangular shape on your fabric. It should look rectangular. I'm just going to connect all the points together, and this is what we should have when you're done. So please note that all the measurements we went upwards and downwards with were taken from that initial middle line that we drew. So what I'm doing next is from that middle line, I'm going inwards by half an inch from the shorter part of the rectangle. So I'm going inwards by half an inch on both sides, and I'll be showing you guys what to do with these points much later. Now I'll be placing this onto my main fabric, which is this brown material here. So if this was a dress or a trouser, this would be the fabric. All right, so I'm using this brown material as an illustration. So you want to place the fabric's right side facing like this. I'm holding it down with pins just so it stays in place and doesn't move. Then I'm going to sew around using that marked rectangle as a guide. So I'm going to use the marked spot as a guide and sew all the way around. You can see I stitch from here up, down, and this other end. What I'll be doing next is to cut open the welt pocket, and to do this, those marked spots we made earlier, those half-inch marks, we'll be using it to create a triangle like this. From this end you can see, then you want to connect it back to the other end. So you have, when you're done, you should have it looking like a small triangle on each side of the welt pocket. So this is what you should have. So I'm going to cut it out. I'll cut it open rather. So I'm just going to fold it into two like this just so it gets easier. Then when I cut, you can see that when I don't cut to the end or cut past the thread line. Then I go into the sides to make that triangular cut, and this is what you should have. You want to make a small triangular cut like this, and I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side. Just cut through that midline. So when I get towards the end, I'm going to make that triangular cut that we marked out earlier. You want to cut out the other side, you can see, and you should have something like this on either side. Next up, I'm going to turn it inside out, turn the welt part of the pocket inside, and give it a good press just so everything lays nice and relaxed. So this is what it looks like once it has been pressed. You can see it lays nice and flat, and this is the opening for the welt pocket. This is the wrong side, and this is the right side of the pocket. So what we'll be doing next is to fold this upwards. So you just want to make a small fold from both sides. You want to take your time to do this, all right? So I'm just going to fold the lower part first. I like to start with the lower part, and when folding, you want to ensure that you're not mistakenly moving your actual fabric alongside. Okay, so I'm just going to secure the edge of each fold with a pin just so it doesn't move and just so it stays in place. Okay, so when pinning, you're not pinning the folds to the actual fabric, you're actually just pinning the fold on the material that is used to make the welt pocket. And I'm going to repeat the same thing on the top of the pocket. Just create a small fold, and when folding, you want to ensure that your fabric does not overlap each other, like the pocket or the fabric used to making the pocket does not overlap each other. You want to ensure that they come really close to each other and they touch each other, but they do not overlap. All right, so I'm going to secure the fold with a pin like I did for the lower part on this side, and I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side as well. So after pinning it down, this is what we have. You can see that I just pinned the fold without actually getting through to the main fabric. You can see that I just pinned the fold. So what I'll be doing next is to sew these sides like this, and the other side I'm going to flip the main fabric over and sew it like this, ensuring that this tiny triangle cut here is held with the seam. All right, you can see what I mean when I say the welt fold should not overlap. You can see that they touch each other, right? They touch each other, they come really close, but they do not overlap each other, because if they overlap, it tends to distort movement when trying to like put things in your pocket or take things out of your pocket. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew those edges down. All right, after sewing it, this is what we have. I gave it a good press and relaxed all the seams. Now we'll be making the bag for the pocket. For the pocket bag, I'm going to cut a fabric that is 13 inches long and wide enough to be attached to the edge of the welt pocket. So depending on how much allowance you have for your welt pocket will determine the width of this, but I like to make the pocket bag a little bit wider, so it's better to have more than to have less. Now to attach the pocket bag to the welt, you want to place your pocket bag right side facing onto the wrong side of your pocket to the lower part, and you want to join along the width. So you want to join the width of the pocket to the width of the pocket bag on the lower side. When you're done, it should look something like this. So you want to ensure that you're starting off with the lower part and not the upper part. I gave it a good press to relax all the seams, and this is what we have. Next up, I'm going to be sewing around the perimeter of the pocket, basically sewing all the way around with a stop stitch before coming back and showing you guys how to seal the bag from the top as well as from the sides. Okay, so before going ahead to sew the pocket bag to the top of the welt as well as the sides, I'm just going to go ahead and stitch around it. So this is what it looks like once it is stitched around. Then to seal up the top part of the pocket bag, I'm going to take the other end of the pocket bag like this. you can see that this is the upper part, or this would be attached to the upper part. So I'm just going to bring it upwards like this, and then I would stitch along the width of the welt. Now when doing this, you want to ensure that you are not mistakenly stitching on your main fabric, just the allowance on the welt pocket. So after stitching the top part, I will go ahead and stitch the sides of the pocket. So I would bring the pocket back upwards like this. Just see what I'm doing. Bring it upwards to meet with the allowance of the upper part of the welt. Make a top stitch along the width. Then you want to ensure that your main fabric is not being caught in any thread or any seam. So after doing that, you will now go ahead and stitch the sides of your bag closed and trim off any excess allowance. All right, now after joining the sides of the pocket as well as attaching the pocket back to the top part of the welt, this is what it looks like. And this is something that you can line. So if you're using lining for your fabric, right after installing the welt pocket, you would go ahead and line your main fabric. And this is the final look. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section. Do give it a thumbs up if you learned something or enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. I'll be seeing you guys in another tutorial.